Good evening, good day, or good night, or good morning, I guess, as well, probably, to the Azerbaijan edition of the Wall of Champions podcast. As usual, I'm joined on the internet by Luce. Good evening, Luce.
Howdy.
Good evening, Greg, as well.
Good evening.
All right, so we'll get straight into it. I mean, not much happened at Baku, so there's probably not much to talk about. We'll probably be done inside 5 minutes or so.
Just lights the flag victory for Dan Ricciardo. I mean, that's it, really.
Definitely
Maybe
lights
if
the
we're
flag.
talking about last year.
Yes, we should remember last year's race instead, where nothing happened except a couple of computer failures in the cars. All right, well, we'll kick straight into what happened in the race. We'll start with qualifying actually. So let's flash up the qualifying results there. You know, after Canada and then watching qualifying for Azerbaijan, I don't think the race allayed my fears too much. I'm beginning to be concerned by the pace of the Mercedes.
Yeah, it's starting to look a bit foreboding, isn't it? But there are two tracks that supposedly suit it. So I didn't actually get to watch qualifying, but it sounded pretty even more dominant this time from Lewis Hamilton. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this trend continues.
Hamilton, yeah.
I predicted it. I said this is going to be a weekend where they were going to have a really strong car, and it proved to be the case. Well, especially in qualifying.
I mean, Hamilton was the only one to get into the 40s. You know, he done a 40.5, and he's half a second clear of Bottas. So, I mean, that's a crushing pole to be on pole by 5 tenths. And in fact, I think he had. Oh no, Bottas got within a couple of tenths of him at Canada, didn't he? So, that's
Vettel was closer. Vettel was really close at one stage, wasn't he? So
after the first runs, but then Hamilton threw the gauntlet down on his second run at Canada.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I have a theory. About Ferrari's qualifying performance, but we'll get to that after we talk about the race a little bit. So obviously we had a 2x2 on the front two rows. It was Hamilton, Bottas, Raikkonen, Vettel. It was interesting to see Kimi out-qualify Seb for the second time this year.
Yeah, it was.
It felt like Seb didn't really have a good day until Sunday actually came around. Like it felt he didn't look particularly quick. I didn't think in free practice either. Although Seb can often not. But yeah, interesting to see that Kimi seems to be pulling it out in qualifying at the moment. I think that the biggest thing that worried me is the fact that, you know, Kimi and Seb were both over a second off Hamilton's pole time at Azerbaijan. Like, that's just crazy for what's been a close season so far.
Yeah, it's been a real flip-flop, hasn't it? Hamilton's generally had one good race and one bad race, but he seems to have strung two together now, so it might be a turning point. You never know in this season.
I think obviously the track suited the Mercedes, but also I think the Ferrari just couldn't get its tyres to work for a qualifying run. Obviously we saw later on in the race that they were actually quite handy, but it's just getting them up to temperature for a couple laps. They just couldn't do it, and I think that might have made the gap look a bit better than what probably represents the two cars.
Yeah, I mean, but that's an interesting form reversal, isn't it, from the early part of the season where it looked like Ferrari were much better at their tyre usage than what Mercedes were.
Yeah, not sure if it's to do a tyre warm-up problem or something like that, but yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure track temperature-wise whether they struggle to get their tyres up to temperature, whether that's been a theme throughout the season or not. But they've had enough pole positions to indicate that they're a lot stronger this year than they've normally been in qualifying. So it's still a bit of a shock to see them more than a second back.
Yeah, I agree. And Daniel Ricciardo, for the second time this year, we saw crashed in Q3. I mean, obviously he went on to actually have a very, very good Sunday, but you know, he had his, for the second time this year after Melbourne, to have an accident in Q3. It seems very un-Ricciardo-like, I would have thought, to have incidents like that.
Yeah, but I think the Red Bull drivers, I think we've mentioned it, they're both sort of pushing really hard to make up for the shortfalls of the car and the engine that they've got right now. And it was a weird little shunt as well. I caught a replay of it. It looked something like from iRacing with Pogo, with the bloody suspension bouncing up and down. So it was a weird one, but I guess he was just overdriving the car. That's just what you've got to do.
But we have seen accidents like that throughout the weekend. Before they took obviously the curbing away for that little section where the castle is. Obviously, we saw it. I think.
Oh, did they change the track? Did they?
They did
Yes.
after Palmer's accident there on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Well, we saw a few good drivers making mistakes this weekend. It looked very tricky out there.
we actually saw, Bottas clipped that wall in qualifying. I think on his fastest lap, he clipped that wall at the castle on the right hand side with his rear.
Okay.
Which is crazy. The other thing that Ricciardo done, looking at the qualifying results, is he wrecked the Noah's Ark form of the grid, because it was Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, Force India, Williams. If he had have actually managed to go, sort of around fifth, it could have been a full-on Noah's Ark in the top 10, which probably goes to show that Azerbaijan's a very good track for actually separating for showing the performance of the cars, if you understand what I mean. Like, it's more of a car circuit than it is a driver's circuit.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. But the massive straight is going to show you who's got the strongest engine, I suppose. And
the crazy thing is that Red Bull were fastest in the speed traps all weekend, merely because their chassis worked so well at Azerbaijan for whatever reason. They were able to actually trim the downforce off.
Trimming the downforce might have contributed to, the overdriving and the crash. I'm not going to try and make excuses for him, but it might have made it a bit more edgy. I don't know.
Yeah, although the Red Bull drivers, we know Max binned it in practice. He had a big shunt down at turn 1. Yep, and but they looked very good early in the weekend. So
yeah, they did.
I wonder if it's a false dawn for Red Bull. I guess we'll find out when we get to Austria as to whether they've actually improved that much. Or if it's just merely circumstance helped them out.
Yeah, but I don't. It's really difficult to say. I mean, obviously they're good in practice, but then in qualifying they sort of fell away a bit, and in the race, obviously we never really got to see how things played out.
Yeah, Form's just bouncing around all over the place this year.
Yeah, that seems fair to me. But also, to show off how much of an engine circuit it is, Force India were the 4th best, and then he had Williams down there in the top 10 as well. There was only 5 teams represented in the top 10. And then Toro Rosso just on the fringe of the 10. The Haas cars struggling with brakes all weekend, particularly Grosjean. I don't really understand.
What a surprise!
Yeah, I don't really understand Grosjean, because I mean he was complaining so much in practice about his brakes, and yet it just doesn't seem like Magnussen has those kinds of problems.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard that the team admitting that they had real problems with consistency with the brakes. They don't know whether they're going to work or not, but. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Didn't Grosjean also say he was a bit sick of copying all the team radio broadcasts of him bitching about his brakes? I mean,
yeah, he refused. He wasn't critical of the team in when they said to him, "Oh, you sounded like you were very frustrated." He's like, "No. We just want to get it resolved. I'm not angry at the team. It's just we win and lose together kind of thing."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I saw another. I saw him in the pen. I think after qualifying of the race, he refused to answer any questions, which was interesting.
Yeah,
so, I don't know. Maybe there's a chance that maybe the FOM's just sort of singling out his broadcasts. I mean, the drivers all bitch about the balance
probably
of the car all the time.
Probably for the same reason we hear Kimi a lot on team radio as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the broadcast.
Well, we hear him sometimes. I hear him sometimes. Yeah. It's a bit of a funny subject, that, because there's some weekends where you really want to hear a driver because they're in an interesting situation, and you just don't hear from them. And then you'll hear team radio from Marcus Ericsson out of nowhere.
Yeah, it comes back to, I hope that FOM go more in the direction of American motorsport, where like NASCAR, for instance, you can listen to your favorite driver for the entire race if that's what you want to do. I hope that it should be technically possible for them to do that.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
In an online broadcasting format, and I hope they head in that direction, because I'd love to just listen to the drivers I want to listen to.
I'd love to be able to ride on board with my favorite driver for the whole race, which I think you can do on some pay TV platforms.
Possibly. I know Premiere had like an onboard channel, but I don't think you got to choose which which car you could do that with. And it goes back to, didn't you say that it could only get live on board from whoever the helicopter's pointing at? So
yeah. Otherwise, it's got to be beamed back over data. So
that's more of a technical discussion, really.
Yeah, for sure. It was a pretty poor weekend for Renault. Although on Sunday Hulkenberg was in a good position and then ripped a corner off it very, very clumsily. But they up until Saturday looked like they had poor pace, and obviously they had they had Palmer putting it into the wall in practice, and then his car caught fire on him in FP3.
So unlucky.
Very unlucky for Jolyon Palmer. Yeah. But hitting the wall's not unlucky. That was just clumsy.
I don't know. The sun might have got in his eyes, and that's pretty unlucky.
Oh yeah, that's right. The old sun in the eyes problem. Yeah.
Even though he was driving completely in the shade at that time and not facing the sun at all.
It's too dark.
It's the stroboscopic effect or whatever it is. That's what.
He was preparing for the sun. That caused him to have the accident.
The tint on his eyes was just a bit too dark, I think. For that,
very
that
unlucky.
Circuit. Yeah, it was very unlucky.
I think the fact is that Jolyon Palmer once again had a very, very poor weekend. Not all of it down to himself. Obviously, his failure and his fire, but you could also argue that those things may have come down to him having the accident in the first place. So
you could also say like my exhaust failure in my go-kart race that gave me a reprieve from doing 20 laps, which I didn't think I was physically capable of doing. Maybe the engine failure saved Jolyon from going into the wall again in qualifying and the race. So it could have made him make him look better than he actually is this weekend.
You would have thought. I'm sure
could have been it might have been a good weekend from that perspective. Well, for Jolyon Palmer. He might be happy that it turned out that way.
Yeah, it's tough to say because I think every driver would have been frustrated to have retired from that race where it looked like correct. Yeah, they're the ones you want to be in. McLaren not representative. They only did a couple of laps each because they had such a huge amount of penalties hanging over their head. So we didn't see much from McLaren.
I'm pretty sure Alonso started around second or third row of my go-kart race. That's how many grid spots he had to take.
he was at the Circuit de Mark Webber. And,
yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw him on the grid. So he said he had a long way to go to get to Azerbaijan from that part back on the grid.
He was out in a yacht in the middle of the Caspian. He was miles off. Yep. But so not representative of Honda. Obviously, they had the new spec engine in Fernando's car on Friday. It duly failed in FP1. I mean, what more can you say?
Just Honda things.
Just Honda things. Yeah. So, and then of course, it was Sauber under first weekend without Manisha Kaltenborn as team principal. So I don't even know who their team principal is now, in fact, whether they've even got one at this stage.
Acting, I think, at this stage. I think. Or maybe the board. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, Chris Pine, I believe he's... They've got him back from the Enterprise and he's now leading Sauber.
Very good.
All right, so we flick over to the race result and,
What about Williams? Yeah. The one thing I was surprised. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're right.
I think we should mention it because we give him a lot of stick. But qualified Massa, didn't he?
For the first time, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't watch it, so in my view, it didn't happen. But I heard that. I can't believe it without seeing it.
If we
qualified Massa,
flick back to the qualifying result, Q3. So in Q1, Lance was half a second off Felipe. In Q2, he was half a second ahead of Felipe.
Yeah.
And in Q3, he was 0.04 of a second ahead of Felipe.
Maybe Felipe's rear damper had already broken at that point. That might explain why that happened.
It's possible, but good on Stroll. He had a good weekend. We'll get to that with the race result, but he actually legitimately looked like a Formula One driver this weekend.
Yeah.
Yes, and we also can't forget that Felipe Massa did his absolute utmost to try and kill himself during qualifying.
He did. Felipe's got to be regretting the fact he wears white overalls after that down that downhill left-hander doing 300 k's an hour, and to get touch of oversteer there. Oh, how brave you have to be to keep your foot in it. It's just crazy. And so many brake lockups and almost smacking the wall a couple of times. And as Lou said, he was very lucky to survive the end of that lap. With his life intact. It
wasn't just
crazy.
One lap. He did that on multiple laps as well. He looked like Lance Stroll. They must have swapped helmets or something for qualifying.
It's possible. Maybe they did do that. Anyway, just a shout out to anyone who might be watching. Feel free to throw us some questions whilst we sit here and yabber on. So switching to the race result, and we've already said it, but what a crazy race! I mean, we've probably been due for a race like that for a while, where it's just absolute bedlam. And I mean, in the end, only 6 cars weren't classified, but it just felt like such heavy attrition, and. I mean, it started down at turn 1, right, where Kvyat spooked Sainz into a spin.
Yeah, that was the sort of thing you thought only happened to people in sim racing or whatnot, like where you're sort of a bit amateurish and you think, oh, that couldn't happen in real life. The car's got so much grip, but it turns out it can happen in real life, it can happen to anyone. So yeah, it was a funny one, that one.
And after the first couple of laps, you had one car a lap down because you had a puncture, and that was Bottas. You had another car in the pits after 3 laps getting the brake ducts clean because they said these brake ducts are on the verge of failing, and that was Daniel Ricciardo. And you had one Toro Rosso at the back of the field because of what we just said, and that was Carlos Sainz. And in the end, Ricciardo won the race, Bottas was second, and Sainz finished 8th. So, I mean, if you ever want to see how much of a mixed up race it was, I mean, there it is right there.
Yeah, it was the race we were expecting to see last year, really, when we saw the layout of the circuit.
And, I just got to say, obviously both of them pitting early. I was pushing for someone. I was pushing for someone to pit on the first lap to swap tyres. They practically did, and look where it got them in the end. So
yeah,
I think they had a bit of help.
I feel vindicated. You at that track, just go for it, because there's going to be you think there should be a safety car, and there was.
Yeah, I mean, so what I wanted to talk about first was the tyres. Clearly, the tyres were too hard this weekend.
Yeah. Yes,
the whole year.
I was surprised after the first few rounds that they didn't just go, okay, this isn't going to work, maybe we'll try ultra softs around here. But obviously, I think we're locked in and they're not going to change.
Yeah, so
despite
I mean,
the fact that they've gotten rid of the hard tyre.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They have changed. They've abolished the hard tyre for the remainder of the year. They won't use it anyway. Which is a shame for Max, because there goes his orange wall tyres that he enjoyed driving so much as a Dutchman. That's Yeah, I think that it was right that the ultra soft should have been, and the way things are shaping up, they should just about be using the ultra soft everywhere.
Got Sean Connery here.
Oh, hi Jimmy Mushta.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. I guess it's a supply issue, maybe. I'm not exactly sure. There might be a logistical reason.
Apparently,
Yeah,
apparently it's 16 weeks lead time Pirelli needs for tyres.
To manufacture them, yeah, that'll probably be it then. So, I guess they're locked in. So that we'll see more suitable tyres, I guess, for next year. But
I think they're going to soften them right up next year.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of lap times we get out of them, because they might have been the limiting factor that have prevented the cars from going, that much faster that we expected, for this year.
So,
or maybe refueling.
No,
I don't think it's going to happen. It would have been. I think that would have been announced already if they were seriously looking at refueling.
I don't think they would do that.
They should though.
So, the thing with the tires being so hard, and then hopefully they can soften them up. That obviously had a huge impact on the race, because the race was personified by safety cars. Really, like when you look at all the major incidents that happened, it was in and around the safety car periods. Obviously, the first safety car period was for Kvyat's car that was stranded and took a very, very long time for him to clear off the track. So the problem was that if you believe what the drivers were saying, that the safety car was going at about 20 seconds a lap slower than the Delta, than the VSC Delta. And that's why they were all complaining on the radio, saying the safety car is going too slow. And obviously they were all having serious problems. We heard particularly, I think Perez's car was actually critical for tyre pressures being too low. Like the car was actually going to get bogged if he went over a curb, because his tyre pressures are too low. Like obviously these cars are incredibly sensitive. So in a race defined by safety cars, you had the tyres playing a huge role in what was happening at the restarts. A lot of incidents being triggered. I mean, safety cars breed safety cars, as we hear all the time. But here seemed to be probably the worst we've seen it for a while.
Yeah, well, I guess one of them was, obviously brought about by some reckless driving, but I think the other one was brought about by just debris that.
But the debris was triggered by reckless driving.
Yeah, but some of it was, and then some of it was from debris that was from the start of the race. It was just weird.
All right, Greg.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the
question?
just looking for what you wanted to say about what was happening at the restarts and the amount of incidents we saw at the restarts.
Well, yeah. I guess a large part of it's just that huge straight. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about Hamilton and Vettel.
Oh, I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah, no, I wasn't going to mention that at all.
I think we saw it last year in GP2 with the Japanese driver.
Matsushita, yeah.
Where there was some braking, accelerating down the straight, and it didn't really get brought up it was all about the weaving and the brake testing and all that stuff. But I thought Hamilton might have been a little bit sketchy driving down the main straight and then slowing down a little bit and then getting back on it. But I don't know, it didn't cause any issues, so maybe it was fine. But such a long straight, so it gives everyone such a great chance to attack. And
yeah,
they always say yellows breed yellows. It's more of an IndyCar saying or American saying, but
yep,
it seemed to me like debris was having a really bad impact on this race as well, more so than usual.
So Luce said the same thing whilst you weren't listening.
Yeah.
So
No, I heard that, but I thought I'd just reiterate it.
Yeah. So if we look at the first thing that was actually where most of the debris came from, the incident between Raikkonen and Bottas at turn 2. Culpability
wasn't
go.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were going to bring that up.
Yeah,
because we've already disagreed on this, haven't we? Because I didn't think it was Bottas's fault. I just thought it was a racing incident.
It wasn't so much he was fully culpable, but it was clumsy.
It was clumsy, but it's a clumsy corner.
Luce, as the default Raikkonen fan, what did you make of it?
And a Bottas hater. So he's
he's gone. Oh, that's what he thought. He's left. He's up stumps and gone home.
I'll vote for Lewis. So I think it was.
I think it was bloody Bottas, and he's a scumbag. Yeah. So
I think it's a really shocking curb. It just lends itself to having incidents. So.
I mean, Valtteri said after the race, he said he went over the curb and then there was no room on the exit for 2 cars.
Yeah.
So
whereas I think the separate incident that happened later, and we disagree on this as well, with Ocon and Perez, I thought that was Ocon's fault.
Oh, I think that was definitely Ocon's fault. But at the same time, I thought Perez probably could have avoided it if he really wanted to.
I don't think he could have.
Yeah, I mean, there was contact between the two that we didn't really see on the run from turn 1 to turn 2. So,
I guess so.
So Ocon was already alongside him, and Perez. I don't think it was deliberate. I think Perez dived to the left and actually made contact with Ocon's car. So they'd already made contact on the run to the corner. And then
I'm only thinking of it from the exit.
Yeah, and so then Ocon looked like he put a pretty clean move up the inside, but then probably suffered the same fate that Bottas did, which is he clipped the curb and it pushed him wide.
I thought it was a bit further on the exit that happened.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought he squeezed Perez, and at that point, I thought Perez had the option to hold off on his throttle application just a touch.
No, I think his tyres were already jammed in between Ocon and the wall. I don't really think he could go on anyway. But anyway, that's just. I think Brundle put that at Ocon's.
Oh yeah, it's definitely more Ocon's fault than it was Perez's.
Yeah,
but I wasn't so harsh on him about it. So. All right, so they were the only 2 incidents happened in a race, right? There was no contact between any other cars at all.
No,
I mean. I want to wait for Luce to get back because I know we disagree pretty strongly on the Hamilton Vettel incident.
Really?
Yes.
Does he still think that Hamilton brake tested it?
Yeah. So we'll wait for him to come back before we dive into that. But looking at the other results, first of all, I want to say first points. It's only 2. Fernando Alonso, McLaren.
There he is.
Welcome back, Luce. You missed out on your. We'll give you. Actually, we'll give you the floor right now to talk about what happened at turn 2 between Bottas and Raikkonen.
User has disconnected from you.
Your silence is telling, Luce. He's clearly walked away from his computer.
Yeah, I guess that's what's.
All right, so we'll go back. So Alo, first 2 points.
Yeah.
But he was clearly. Oh, he's back. Oh, jeez.
He's in and out like the Honda engine.
Oh, he's gone again.
Oh, there he goes.
This
Yeah,
is
he's disconnected this time. That was
right.
on purpose. So.
All right, so
A bit like.
jeez.
He's doing a Honda engine change every time. No power in his house.
All right. Well, this is getting a bit clumsy. So, all right. So, Alo got his first points, but he was much higher up the grid with not that long to go in a race, and then obviously lost some position. He was pretty savage on Honda after qualifying, by the way. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah, we laughed about it, didn't we? Because Ricardo overtook him, and he suggested that Ricardo probably didn't know he was on a hot lap. Probably thought he was on a cool down lap because they had no power.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he got points, but I mean, I'm kind of a McLaren fan. I don't really care. I saw a headline from Bullier saying that he didn't really care. No one seems to really care.
User entered your channel.
Yep.
I don't know. I guess they looked pretty ordinary, and
User
Alo.
disconnected from your channel.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it's going to be ridiculous. A bit like the Honda engine. Alonso, even he sort of suggested they could have won the race without the engine. I mean, I don't know. I think they're all a bit depressed, really. They just want the season to be over and done with.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So looking at the other results, Kevin Magnussen, 7th place. That was a really, really good result for him in the Haas. I thought that he did a good job on a day where his teammate finished 13th and was sort of didn't look like he had the pace. And points for Sauber. Pascal Wehrlein got 10th. Now, there's a bit of controversy there between Wehrlein and Ericsson. Yeah, so before the end of the race, Ericsson was given a radio call to allow Wehrlein to go past to attack because he thought he could. So he thought he could chase down Alo. There's more. So he thought he could chase down Alo, and obviously because Sauber are fighting for 10th in the championship with McLaren. So the Ericsson was instructed to let Wehrlein go, and then on the promise that if he didn't catch Alonso, he'd let him back through. But by the end of the race, Van Dorn caught Ericsson, and Sauber didn't want Wehrlein to slow down because they worried that Van Dorn would actually get the both of them. Yeah. So that was why there was no swap back. So unfortunate for Marcus Ericsson, because he actually had a pretty good weekend against Pascal Wehrlein. So
why did he let Pascal through? Is Pascal just a bit quicker at the time?
I think Pascal had better tyres or something at that stage. So or Ericsson approved he wasn't able to catch Alo, so they were giving Wehrlein a chance to do so. So in the end they couldn't afford to give Van Dorn a run on them, so they didn't swap back. So
interesting. It shows the downside of that little temporary switch strategy. Sometimes it can bite you.
Yeah. So. The other thing, of course, is we saw, Polygon was out of the race early again. He had more problems. So Max Verstappen, very, very unlucky.
Yeah, it's getting a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
Did you know that as of now, McLaren have completed more race laps than Red Bull?
As a team?
Yes.
Both. Really?
Yes. Red Bull have actually had worse reliability in terms of how fewer laps they've done, particularly on Verstappen's car, than McLaren, and that's a shocking statistic for Red Bull.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, Red Bull, Verstappen's been in an accident or two from memory, but it's still pretty damning, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I can see why Red Bull are so dirty on Renault at the moment. Yeah,
and particularly at a time when obviously Renault are building up their own team. And it's obviously a real concern for Red Bull. That not only and the fact that Renault have been holding back parts for reliability's sake, and they're still having such shoddy reliability. I mean,
are they still running last year's ERS?
I believe so. Yeah.
No, that's
So
pretty bad because a lot of their problems have been ERS related.
I mean, it's difficult to feel sorry for them after they've just won the race, but at the same time, it seems to be hurting Verstappen more than it's hurt Ricciardo at the moment. I mean, Max has had, I think, 4 retirements in the last 6 races or something like that. Not all of it of his own doing. So it's tough, and obviously, this same week, this is the weekend where. This is the same weekend where they both had accidents as well, in practice and qualifying respectively. So, it's interesting. I don't know where they can go though. Honda's out of the question; they're ridiculous, and I don't think Ferrari or Mercedes would be willing to provide them an engine. So, I don't think we'll have Luce back by the end. So it's just us now. So we'll talk about the elephant in the red car. In the room, and it's a shame because I wanted Luce to have the counterpoint. But you can at least say what he was going to say. Yeah, I can. We've discussed it previously a couple of times. So the incident between Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton at the second restart behind the safety car. Your opinion, go. Well, it was just Vettel going back to his old ways, I think, getting the red mist. I mean, it's pretty clear that Hamilton didn't brake test him, and that seems to have been proven out with the FIA looking at the data. And Vettel, as we know, has form driving into the back of people in the safety car or driving too slowly under the safety car. Yep. So it was all on, and I mean, after what we saw with Hamilton, we both agree on this really. After what we saw in the first restart, where Hamilton almost overtook the safety car, then it was a given that he was going to slow down a bit more. Yeah. Before the second restart, and it was all on Vettel really, and what happened afterwards was completely unacceptable. So what I'll do, I'll say the factual stuff first, which is, and as announced by the stewards, because they made it public because they didn't want the public to be arguing such points, that Lewis Hamilton did not brake at all. No. Nor he just didn't accelerate. No, he held constant speed through the corner. He didn't accelerate out of the corner. And not only that, I think the most key thing is that his behavior in that corner was identical to what it was at the first restart. Yep. He did exactly the same thing at the first restart through that corner. Yep. So the my opinion bit is that it's 100% Seb, 0% Hamilton at fault. And not only that, for driving into the back of him in the first place on Seb, and what happened afterwards was completely unacceptable. Like that was that sort of behavior from a driver it cannot be tolerated and should not be tolerated, even if you're a fan of that driver. Obviously, I'm more of a fan of Seb than I am of Hamilton, but I stuff like that's unacceptable. We both give, like, in terms of conflict of interest, not really there is such a thing as a fan, but we're both very harsh on Hamilton when he does something we consider stupid. I'm a Ferrari fan. I therefore support Vettel, but at the same time, when Maldonado's done stuff like that, coincidentally to Hamilton and then to Perez at Monaco, I've said he needs to be banned. So, like, for a race at least, because that's just unacceptable, using your car as a weapon like that, and sets a very bad example. So I mean, it was I guess you could say it was one of the harshest penalties they had in their arsenal. Short of a black flag. DQ, short of a DQ, that was probably the worst that they could give him. I mean, it would be, I guess you'd be taking a very hard line if you disqualified him on the spot, because you'd be reluctant to do that without data or an absolute proof. It's sort of heat of the moment stuff. I guess the penalty points sort of do the same thing, but it's almost something you'd ban them for. If Grosjean can get banned for causing a start line accident like that accidentally through it's reckless, but it wasn't intentional. Whereas what Vettel did was intentional, and it's bad. It's just bad. There's no nice way to
to phrase it.
It was the sort of thing you'd expect to see in F1, in F3 or GP3 or something like that. It was, or even Formula Ford or something like that.
Oh,
Like it was
not even that.
Yeah.
You might see it in go karts even, and people would come down on people in go karts quite heavily for doing something like that. So
having an accident is not a thing that any driver should be itching to do. So therefore, deliberately having, particularly in open wheelers, so going ahead and having deliberate contact with another car, even if you're going to perfectly time it so you bounce wheel on wheel, I think it's just crazy. And I think what Hamilton said after the race is he's definitely got a point. I thought he was very controlled after the race in what he said.
Yeah, so did I, yeah.
But what he did say, I think that rang true, was that it is a bad example. And, there's going to be a whole bunch of drivers out there who just watched a 4-time world champion deliberately hit another car. And a number of guys out there are probably going to think that that's probably okay. And I think that's a shame. Although, what Seb said is also true. F1's for adults. I understand they're all adults, and the red mist descends on us all. It's not like Hamilton's got a clear copybook when it comes to things like that. So
no, but I think he's beyond that though. He's above that kind of behaviour.
And it's a shame, but
for the silly things that Hamilton says and does, at least he's above that kind of behaviour.
And it's a shame that Seb's not.
Yeah, because it's the Seb of old. Like, we've seen it. It kind of reeks of Malaysia 2013, and I don't know, just
Mexico last year.
Mexico last year. It sort of reeks of desperation,
Yeah, I mean, and I think
it's weird. It's
Daniel,
very odd.
Yeah, Daniel probably said it correctly when he said, Seb oftentimes under pressure doesn't think before he acts.
No, yeah,
or before he speaks. And I think that probably rings true for a guy who probably knows Seb quite well from being in the Red Bull Junior program and then being at Toro Rosso and then being his teammate at Red Bull. So now I'll put my loose hat on, and it feels disquieting. But so he argued that Hamilton was too slow out of the corner, and that he possibly should have been penalised for driving like an idiot behind a safety car. I don't think there's an argument for that personally, but how do you feel about that?
No, I don't think so. He is the safety car at that point. But I made the point earlier actually about the actual start-finish straight where it looked a bit dubious what he was doing. Like it looked like he was accelerating and then slowing down, and they were all like concertinaing up. But no one seems to. It hasn't been brought up by anyone anywhere, so maybe it's just I'm remembering it wrong.
Yeah, so
it
this
is
is
as bad as what it looked.
So Luce and I did talk about this before, obviously, and what, because he said, Hamilton shouldn't have accelerated through the corner, and I've gone, well, his behaviour was the same, but I think if Seb thought that Hamilton was going, because what Luce said was that obviously Seb was going to react because he didn't want to get away from Hamilton. And my retort was, if Vettel thought that Hamilton was actually jumping at that point, Seb clearly wasn't thinking at the time, because there was no way he can jump out of the penultimate corner and not catch the safety car before the line. In fact, you saw it both the restarts, and Luce argued this point with me as well. He said, the first restart, Hamilton jumped out of the last corner, and said, I don't remember it like that. I remember him not jumping on the accelerator until they were going through the kinks. But I said, but even if I grant you that and say that at the first restart, Hamilton went out of the last corner, what the hell was Vettel doing? Because it's still a corner too early. And and Vettel had to have seen how close, they were to catching the safety car at the first restart. He had to have, and he probably got feedback from the team. So he had to have known that that it was Hamilton wasn't jumping at that point, and he still had the run between the penultimate corner and the last corner to actually catch Hamilton before he had any risk of losing ground to him. So my feeling is that Seb was just asleep. He just wasn't paying attention.
I wouldn't say he was asleep. I think he was too amped up, because it's not like he was reacting to anything. There was nothing to react to. Which
was my argument. I don't know what he was reacting to.
You can't preempt someone gunning it. Like, you've got to go as soon as possible after they gun it. That's just the whole premise of being in second at a safety car restart. Like, you can't jump them. You'll get a penalty.
Yep.
So I'm not exactly sure what he was getting at with that. So
yeah, so I think it's and look, if he gets referred to the World Motorsport Council, which the FIA can do, I don't know if they will, but if they did do it and they disqualified him from the race, I wouldn't complain about that. If they don't,
No,
then fair enough. But if they do, I'd say, you know what, fair enough.
They'll probably leave it at that. But yeah, if they were to do that, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
I think I think a lot like the Mexico situation last year, they will let it go if Seb admits that he was at fault and apologizes for it.
I don't think he's going to this time.
No, and that makes me think that maybe it won't be the end of it. If Seb's not willing to be contrite, and certainly after the race, he even refused to admit that there was contact between them side by side. He was only talking about the contact front to rear, and he said it was all Hamilton's fault. Disagree with that, but anyway.
I think he's probably going to have one of those moments maybe at the next race where, like Malaysia 2013, where he retrospectively kind of admits that he's at fault.
Yep.
But then actually Malaysia 2013, then he retrospectively said he wasn't at fault.
Yeah, but I mean, at Mexico, after Mexico last year, he admitted that the way he spoke to Charlie over the radio was unacceptable, and he wrote an apology letter. I would imagine that the FIA will be very much saying, look, we really want you to say something to younger drivers that kind of thing's not acceptable. Like, it doesn't matter what situation you're in, you should not be having deliberate contact. I mean, this isn't Prost and Senna. It's not 1989. You know, we can't have that kind of thing.
Well, they were saying those things even back then.
Yeah.
When you watch the Senna movie and Balestier's having a go at them about it or whatever, but yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out with the FIA actually, because they'll probably be keen to have Seb say something, I suppose. But
from a drama perspective, it's good for the championship. Watching those two have a big love-in for the first couple of races, despite this championship battle was getting a bit awkward. But now there's some genuine anger between the two of them.
It looked like it was gonna boil over in Spain if Hamilton lost that race of account of Vettel running him off the road. But it's definitely the gloves are off now.
Yeah, and to think at the end of that race, and I've got to say here that Lewis Hamilton was incredibly unlucky in Baku. He was the fastest driver all weekend. He deserved to win the race, and then to have the incident and then have his headrest come up, and then in the end he actually loses points to Vettel. That's a pretty bad weekend for him, and I felt for him a little bit in that place. And and the fact that he came out and he was very composed, and just said that it's up to him to guide the team through this tough period, which was a very good thing for him to say. He looks mature this year. He hasn't descended into some of the antics that he was descending into with Rosberg.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's all about. I guess his teammates not unsettling him. Maybe he's learning to, because we talked about it in a previous podcast where we thought that maybe he had trouble focusing on the opposition when it wasn't his teammate that he was fighting. But if it's just one other driver, then maybe we'll see the best of Hamilton, because he can try and unite his team against them, I suppose. So yeah, he was. I didn't hear everything or read everything that came out of Baku, but from what I saw of him, he seemed very, very composed about it, because he was. Normally, if something goes wrong mechanically, well, we've seen what can happen with Hamilton, with the things he says, but he had drama on track and with Vettel and mechanical problems, and he seemed to take it all in his stride. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the new.
All right, well, we'll move on from this one now, but yeah, I think we just both agree that was it's a shame Luce isn't here to apportion blame to Vettel, but to Hamilton, but I think this is 200% Vettel's fault between the two of us. So yep. All right, so
I'm glad that Hamilton came out and has been, not that Hoons will read any of it, but Hamilton was quite strongly opposed to what happened as well, and made very relevant points about it. So. Oh, well.
Yeah, it is a contradiction, because Seb is a guy who apparently cares about the sport deeply, and yet it's almost like it's kind of like we never saw Michael do that kind of thing. Well, we did actually in '97, but
Yeah, I was
but
thinking that to myself while we were talking about it. To be
but
honest.
I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like he's got that the same underlying thing that Michael does, where it's like, you know, when you're down in the dirt and playing in the mud, you know, he's not scared to kick somebody in your eye kind of thing. Like he can play a little bit dirty. So anyway, all right, we'll move on from that then because there's still some more stuff to discuss. So what I was surprised about most, just thinking, walking away and thinking about the Mercedes and Ferrari battle in general, is that despite how fast the Mercedes looked all weekend, Hamilton was no threat to Vettel in the back part of that race.
Yeah, I guess so. Race pace is something completely different. They kind of looked like they were pretty even anyway in the early stages, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
From a race pace point of view. So it wouldn't have mattered which was ahead, but I guess when your pace differential isn't that big, then it's going to be hard to overtake.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they both had the red mist anyway, and going hell for leather, so...
The other Mercedes got an overtake done. They got it done right at the start, right at the finish line to take Bottas. Bottas took Stroll for second place.
Very good.
Yep, and I thought that was a good drive by Valtteri.
I thought to myself when I was watching it, and I told my wife that Bottas probably, I don't know how I would have felt if I was in his position when he was a lap down, you know, thinking he's using his engine.
Pretty pointless.
Pretty pointless, you know, want to pack it up and move on to the next one, and he's finished second somehow. So, yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
That was interesting.
And Lance Stroll, P3. I'll just say, good on him. Good on him. Always nice to see a new guy on the podium, and to see Stroll's had a tough start to his Formula One career. Like him or lump him, you know, coming in with a lot of money and being a guy who looked like he was holding on for dear life in the first few races of the season. To hit round 7 or round 8 or whatever it is, and to be on the podium, it's bloody impressive.
Yeah, it's good to see. You give him a lot of shit, or we give him a lot of crap, but you know, it's nice to. I mean, if he gets it, then you can't take it away from him. So.
Yep. So
same with Maldonado's victory in Spain, sort of the same thing. You know, you can't deny anyone the results if they can get them.
I mean, even in a race where where Vettel and Hamilton, you know, are 1-2 and you know, he's off the podium, he's still P5. So I mean, that's still a good result for him.
It was the kind of race where we saw more experienced and much more highly rated drivers, like say Hulkenberg. They were making mistakes.
Oh, Hulkenberg! How disappointing was that? Because he was staring down the barrel of his first podium. I thought, even at the time when I was watching it, I was thinking.
So he hasn't had a podium.
No, never.
So there you go. That's what you get for making the critical error. So
Kevin Magnussen has more podiums in Formula One than Nico Hulkenberg.
Well, Stroll does.
Yeah, Stroll does now. That's exactly right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's, you know, that's why you can't take it away from Stroll. He didn't bin it, like we probably expect him to on a tricky track like that, same as Canada.
But then Hulkenberg has the most clumsy of looking accidents and rips a corner off the car.
Very clumsy, wasn't it?
It was just a not paying attention accident.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain that one, but yeah. There you go. That's just what can happen.
And
happen to anyone.
Felipe Massa was probably another guy who was a chance at being on a podium at least, if not a chance at winning the race. And then he had his
rear damper.
That's the one I'm thinking of, where it broke and you could actually see him porpoising down the straight.
Yeah, unlucky.
Very, very unlucky. So, but we spoke about Sauber grabbed a point, so good for them. We spoke about that at length. And Carlos Sainz was P8, so more points for him. But Toro Rosso are not having a good part of the year at the moment.
Was it another mechanical failure for Daniel Kvyat?
Yes, yeah, he had a full electrical failure, and Franz Tost said that's the first one of those they've had. So they were a bit bemused by that.
Right.
All right.
He's very unlucky.
Well, if we shift focus now to the championship, we see that Seb still leads the championship, but by only 14 points, by 14 points now, so he actually increased that by 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
And Valtteri Bottas remains a very solid third. He's still 27 or 28 points behind Hamilton in second, so he's still more than a win off the top two.
He'll only take a DNF though.
But the biggest thing is Daniel Ricciardo, now P4 in the championship, moved ahead.
That's ridiculous.
He's now 19 points ahead of Kimi.
he doesn't seem to. With the car they've got this year and the reliability, it just doesn't seem like he has any right to be there. That
Yeah.
he's doing, but yeah,
It's definitely a Ricardo thing, though, right? Where he quietly
Yeah.
accumulates points.
Yeah,
and
he does.
he's got more than double the points of Verstappen now.
yeah, but reliability for Max.
Oh, yeah,
has
for
been
sure, for
particularly
sure.
poor, so
That's not on Max. I mean, that's more. That's a. I mean, Max has only got one more point than Perez. So
Wow.
that's how bad his reliability's been. I mean, Perez is 7th in the championship on 44 points. Verstappen's 6th on 45, and Ocon's catching Ocon. Well, Ocon's still haunting Perez. He's only 9 points behind him.
Well, both of those drivers could have had much better points if they'd not crashed into each other at Baku as well. So
There seems to be a lot of festering tension between the Force India drivers over the last couple of races. If you think of Canada and Baku.
yeah, I guess so. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it develops over the European races.
Well, it was hinted at by Force India that they were not happy with what happened. Well, obviously not happy at Baku. They were both a chance at the podium at that point. So
yeah,
and they had very, very good straight line speed, so they would have been difficult to overtake. So it's unfortunate for them, considering Ocon had his problem and still managed to finish in the points. Like, he still managed to finish 6th. So
Yeah.
I mean, they clearly had good pace. And they missed out on a chance of getting both cars on the podium for the first time ever for them. And yeah, so I think it'll get a bit heated down there, but I think it's undeniable that they've got a talent in Ocon, and they don't want to cap him too much because he's probably going to have a higher peak than Perez ever will, and they probably want to make sure he doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's highly possible.
And just a rumor about Force India. Well, not so much a rumor, pretty much confirmed by Otmar Schnell. Can't remember his name. Otmar. I can't pronounce it. Anyway,
who
one of the guys who runs Force India confirmed they will have a name change next year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard the rumors about it, but I didn't know it was confirmed.
Yeah, so pretty much because there's no Indian race now, there's no Indian drivers, the appealing to the Indian market doesn't make a lot of sense. So they'll actually.
It was more to do with Indian sponsors not coming on board.
Yeah. So that was
give it more of an international feel. So
they're actually worried that having the Force India name may actually be keeping sponsors away.
That's true.
Yes.
Well, they were very close from becoming Aston Martin, weren't they? Not too long ago.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that deal got taken out from underneath their noses by Red Bull.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that reminds me of another rumor that I had written down, but I will broach with you, which is the Alfa Romeo McLaren rumor.
Oh, really? Oh, it's the first I've heard about it.
Well, haven't I got a story for you then? So, so looking down, it was pretty much of a muchness in the top 10 of the championship. Only Ricciardo jumping Raikkonen was the only position change. Lance Stroll got himself up to 12th in the championship, so he's now only 3 points behind Felipe. So doing a good job,
bringing a lot of money to the team compared to Felipe. So
yeah, that's right. And if he keeps growing like this, then it opens up the possibility for Williams to maybe nab a driver next year rather than running around with Massa again. I think we can all agree that Felipe, he's driving well this year, but surely he's past his prime. Like, if they got somebody else into that car who's a little bit more aggressive, there may be a certain Spaniard who may be interested in a Mercedes-powered car.
So.
Who knows?
No, I doubt it.
Yeah. So the other movers in the championship were Grosjean, Verline, Kvyat all fell down a spot. Fernando jumped up to the 17th with those 2 points that he got.
I'm sure he's delighted.
Stoffel Vandoorne finally passed Antonio Giovinazzi in the championship.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I was a bit disappointed that Vandoorne wasn't in position for points, but
it was weird because it didn't look like he had a bad race in any way, shape, or form. He just had no pace.
Yeah.
I mean, he was around Alo, and in front of Alo at one of the restarts, and then got passed by a few cars. So
he's being a bit disappointing this first half of the year, hasn't he?
I mean, even judging, going off a car that's poor. I mean, we all give the car that the McLaren is poor.
He's got to do something.
He got in that car last year at Bahrain, and he looked like a superstar. Like, particularly against Button, he was faster than, he'd done a very good job. Against Alonso,
yeah,
he looks up.
Alonso makes everyone a bit.
Yeah, and then at Monaco, all of a sudden he looked really, really good again, and then they put Alonso back. Yeah, and then he binned it in Q2.
He was kind of even with Button, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Consider that was Button's first drive of that car.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's just the ALO effect. You know, the same thing happened
Yeah.
with Massa, the same thing happened with Raikkonen. You know, is ALO just makes him look worse. I mean, the only driver who has ever stacked up well against Alonso is Hamilton. And Hamilton's special, I think we can all admit that, whether you like him or not.
Yep.
So, yeah. And another, you know, still disappointing for Jolly and Palmer yet to get off the mark. And meanwhile, Nico Hulkenberg's up there with 18 points. So,
Yeah, I don't know what more can be said about Palmer really, but
yep. And then
hopefully Kubica gets his seat or something next year. That'd be good.
So the Constructors' Championship is now 24 points in Mercedes' favour, mainly due to Kimi. And not, you know, everything wasn't Kimi's fault this weekend. I mean, he didn't cause the accident with Bottas, and from my perspective anyway. I mean, he was involved in it, but he didn't cause it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I think it's a racing incident.
Yeah,
So.
and you know, then his puncture obviously wasn't his fault. Driving back to the pits and ripping half his floor off definitely was his fault. but he was going to be out of the race anyway, and then they had the red flag, and they did the repair, and then I want to
They could repair that.
I want to talk about that really, really quickly, right? With what happened, because obviously both Perez and Raikkonen ended up with a penalty after working on the car in the garage rather than the fast lane. They were both in the pits already when the red flag got thrown, and they were theoretically already working on the car when the red flag got thrown. So did the FIA or did the stewards expect them to say, oh, hang on, we want to put this car back in race, we'll wheel it out in pieces into the fast lane and then finish the repair out in the fast lane? So, yeah, I mean, obviously it was a weird situation. We hardly ever see it, where a car that's effectively retired from the race re-enters the race because of a red flag. But the fact that they both got penalties, I thought that was too much. Like, I thought that they were already a lap down. Just let them go. It's not like they wheeled the car into the pits from a pit stop, repaired it. You know, when they put the cars in the box, the race was still, you know, they were effectively going to retire from the race. So I thought that giving them a penalty on top of that was a bit harsh, personally.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the rules are about all that, but
well, the rules are that if it's a red flag, if it's in a red flag, you're not allowed to repair the car in the garage. It must be repaired in the fast lane. Like any work you do to the car under red flag must be in the fast lane. But you're talking about cars that were fundamentally broken before the red flag got thrown.
You'd think that they're going to have to look at that rule because, you know, surely you want broken cars to be fixed if they can potentially be fixed.
Oh, of course. You want as many cars in the race as possible.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess it probably was unnecessarily harsh, but if them's the rules, then yeah, not much you can do about it.
All right, so looking at the constructors, mentioned Mercedes at 24 ahead of Ferrari now. So they stretched that lead this weekend because Kimi was a DNF. He did DNF in the end, didn't he? I think he was classified last. Force India are comfortably fourth in the championship, so that looks like they're evolving over time. You know, they got fourth last year, and they look comfortably fourth this year. They're well ahead of Williams, who are now P5. So Williams jumped Toro Rosso for P5 in the Constructors' Championship with that result. So they're now 4 points clear of Toro Rosso in fifth place. Toro Rosso down to sixth. Haas jumped Renault. I mean, Renault is a single car effort at the moment in terms of scoring points. So, you know, Haas have now got 3 more points than Renault does, so 7th and 8th. Sauber down there, they added a point, so they got 5. And all teams have now scored this year because McLaren now have 2 points. And I'm popping one of those little poppers, so, you know, that's, you know, for Alo getting his for the McLaren's first points of the year.
Yep.
So that's the championships covered. I did have a couple of more things written down, which was, first of all, the rumours going around that Ferrari had an extra oil reserve in their car up until this weekend, and apparently James Allison dobbed them in for that because it was something that was a carryover from, and this isn't confirmed, this is just a rumour that I heard. They had an extra oil reserve and they were burning oil, and then all of a sudden they've had to take that out and miraculously have lost qualifying performance. Do you think those rumours, there could be something to those rumours, or is it just Azerbaijan specific?
No, there could be something to the rumours.
Particularly if James Allison has dobbed them in for it. He would know.
That's fair play. If you have that knowledge and you can use it, you know, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. I'm just trying to, you know, whether that's a reason why all of a sudden in qualifying, at that peak performance level. That I mean, you could argue maybe the additional oil tank would come into play more in a race, but it depends on how they do it. Maybe it does help them more in qualifying than it does in a race for peak oil burn. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't really have much knowledge of that, to be honest, but everyone suspected Mercedes were doing it, and clearly...
So
not clearly. I don't know. Were the speed trap differences between Mercedes and Ferrari particularly big? Because we saw that the Mercedes really jumped in Q3 speed at a place like Bahrain, is where I remember it.
Yeah,
they gained quite a lot of speed. Ferrari gained a bit more speed, but not quite as much. So I haven't looked at it in great detail, to be honest. So it wouldn't surprise me though. I mean, normally where there's smoke, there's fire, or oil burning in this case. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that was a true story.
Very good. All right. So the thing is, for next year, that the oil mass in the car will be monitored according to the 2018 regulations. So next year, teams will not be able to do it at all. They won't be able, because the oil mass in the car will be monitored as of next year. Apparently, if you read the 2018 rule set as it sits right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so next thing, on this day 7 years ago, Mark Webber caught flight at Valencia and flipped his car into a DHL sign, and then somehow miraculously walked away from a massive crash into the barrier. I just wanted to talk briefly. Obviously, you were at the Circuit de Mark Webber on the weekend just gone, racing around in some karts and seeing some horror kart smashes. And it's a shame Luce isn't here to enjoy that. But I just wanted to talk briefly. How good do you think Mark Webber was?
I thought he was better than average. It's weird because he seemed to be really good, especially over a single lap at the start of his career, and sort of in the mid to late 2000s, I guess.
Yep.
I don't know. I guess you could say he was good enough. He was good at getting sort of popular opinion behind him. He was sort of guilty of ignoring team orders just as much as Seb was.
Definitely.
Somehow, he got away with it.
Probably because he wasn't a winner, and everyone loves an underdog.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, when I say he wasn't a winner, I mean Seb was winning that battle against him. So
yeah. I don't know. I mean, he's not. He's in that kind of Jensen Button level, I would say, where he's not exactly.
I think so. I think that's probably right.
I'd say he's kind of Jensen Button level. If that's probably the easiest way to.
I mean, obviously, I watched his entire career, and like you, I was perplexed by the fact that at the start, he seemed to be an absolute qualifying gun, and then sort of drifted backwards in races. Somewhat like Jarno Trulli. But by the end of his career, he was actually a better racer than he was qualifier. I think that the change to Pirelli tyres really hurt his career. I thought he looked really good on the Bridgestones in 09 and 08. 09 and 2010 when Red Bull had a good car, and then then as they moved more towards the blown diffusers, and they went to the Pirelli tyres, I felt, and if I remember, I'm only remembering here, this isn't something I know as fact, I remember hearing Mark say once that his advantage over Seb was always in the fast corners.
Yeah,
and
I was going to bring that up.
Yep, and so when he was in 09 and 2010 on the Bridgestones, he's the places where he was faster than Seb were because he was faster in the fast corners. But when they introduced the Pirelli tyres, they took the characteristic away from the cars that was enabling him to have an advantage over Seb in the fast corners, which meant that they neutralised his advantage in the fast corners, and then Seb was obviously better in the slower corners.
I think Seb used the blown diffuser a bit better as well.
Oh, he did. Some of those qualifying laps you watch from that era is just like, sounds like he's almost flat. So
because he was using these weird lines as well. They were really wide at the apex, but he was obviously maintaining corner speed.
Yep.
And I guess it worked with the blown diffuser.
Yep.
So it's very non-intuitive, and for someone who's sort of had I always thought Mark's driving style was very traditional, very clean.
Yep, certainly not an Alonso, not an Alonso or a Vettel. Probably more like a Hamilton.
Yeah, there wasn't much flair to it. It was very sort of, I don't know what you'd call driving styles without sounding a bit like a wanker like Peter Windsor, but it's sort of very utilitarian.
He throws out some Peter Windsor shade.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm sure he knows much more about it than I do, but yeah, it seemed very no nonsense and not very. There's not much flair to it, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So I don't know.
I feel like Jensen Button's probably a good thing. I mean, a good comparison.
Jensen's sort of. I'm just talking purely in terms of performance. Jensen's a very smooth driver, even more smooth than Mark Webber. He had a driving style all of his own, but
Yep.
I wasn't prepared to take questions about Mark Webber, so I'm just sort of winging it.
I like throwing these ones in so that you know, we sort of have a very sort of a non-predefined discussion about someone.
Yeah, well, in general, he's just not quite top tier. But,
Yep.
I mean, Jensen took his opportunities, won a championship. Mark Webber, he stuffed up at Korea, and that was his championship lost. So.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, if he hadn't have binned it the way he did in 2010, he probably would have won the championship.
Yeah, and there's a lot of what ifs, you know, after that, because you win a championship, you know, your career changes. Maybe it takes the wind out of it steals a bit of Seb's momentum. You know, maybe Seb doesn't go on to win, you know, the next 3 championships.
And then he had the Ferrari contract on the table that he decided against. Probably a good decision in the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, Seb's kind of ordinary. Alonso, as we know, is the second coming of Christ. So he would have been absolutely towed at Ferrari if he was Fando's team, and he would have had even less of a legacy. But as it was, he left sort of having Seb as the bad guy. And
yeah, let me just say there's a lot of similarities between old Jesus and Alo, and that's a big thing for Jesus.
Yeah, I know it is a big thing for Jesus. Jesus never won 2 world championships, did he?
No.
I bet he hasn't raced in Formula One and IndyCar, so you know.
No, that's right. I never saw him go for the Triple Crown. All right,
right.
So we'll finish off with just one last thing. Happy birthday to 2016 F1 Formula One world champion Nico Rosberg.
Oh, is it his birthday today?
It is his birthday today, and yeah, I mean
27th of June.
Yes.
Yeah, day after my birthday. There you go.
Yes. Oh, and happy birthday to you for yesterday.
That's all right.
And I don't think I talked to you yesterday.
No, you talked to me, but you didn't wish me happy birthday.
Oh, you didn't even talk to me on my birthday, Greg.
What are you talking about?
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you scumbag. Yeah, you scumbag.
I can't remember where I was or what I was doing.
Yeah, you weren't talking to me, I know that much.
I'll apologise to you. I apologise to Jesus, and I apologise to Peter Windsor.
Oh, yeah,
people I've offended in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, lucky we're not born offended in this stream, Greg. That just wouldn't be a good review. And Shadow Master says sup. Hey, what's up? Shadow Master is sup. So as I said,
finding a safe space for all the people who've offended.
That's going to be a big room. So, so Nico Rosberg, quick thoughts on Rosberg. Do we miss him off the grid this year, or do we think that the battle between Vettel and Hamilton is better than the battle between Hamilton and Rosberg?
I don't. I can't say I miss him, to be honest. We know how he always played it very cool with the media, so there wasn't really much to him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He did what he had to do, and he left the sport. So you know.
We should all be so lucky to get in the Formula One, win a championship, and then leave on our own terms.
Yeah, you know, he's not the most exciting guy. I mean, we've got our battle now. We've got our battle. I suppose he could have potentially complicated things with Hamilton v Vettel.
Yeah. Do you think he'd be doing better this year, hypothetically, than what Bottas is?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think he may very well have been at the level of Bottas, because there's been a big regulation change. So I personally think that Hamilton's probably more adaptive than Rosberg is to those sorts of things. So
I'd agree with that.
I think I'd say that it probably would have taken Rosberg a little while to get back up to speed. Well, it would have taken Rosberg longer than Hamilton to get up to speed. So that's the way I look at it. So in terms of pure performance, that's kind of why I don't understand why there's rumours going around about Bottas and Mercedes, because I think he's doing a good job.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. I think he's doing very, very well.
I think he's doing no worse than I think Rosberg would be doing. So yeah,
yep. Can't argue with that.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll call it there. So thanks to everybody who tuned in. Reminder that the Austrian Grand Prix is on Sunday, the 9th of July. So we'll be back here on the 11th of July to discuss that. probably. It's similar time to what we're at now, and hopefully we'll have Loose back for next time with a better internet connection. Austria should be interesting because Austria is a very different track from Azerbaijan. In that it's where Azerbaijan tended to be more of a higher downforce, medium to high. Obviously, Austria, I think they run quite a low downforce setup. So,
okay, well, we'll see what happens.
All right. So once again, thanks to everybody who tuned in. Final thoughts from you, Greg?
I guess the battle is on now. The gloves are off. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting for the rest of the season to see what goes down.
My final thoughts are the same. I think that it's been a very soft championship so far, and that the battle's been very controlled between Hamilton and Vettel. And I think now that sooner or later it was going to get nasty, and it did at Azerbaijan. So it'll be interesting to see how the two of them react to that. I think Seb's probably will handle a psychological battle better, but only time will tell to the end of the year. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time.